I don't think I truly experienced life until I turned 64. I kept wondering what had been holding me back all these years, what I had denied myself. This inner questioning felt like both a reprimand and an awakening. Bruce didn't speak, he just observed, and that gave me the strength to carry on. He supported me with his gaze, not with his hands, as my fingers slowly reached for the straps and pulled them down. "Oh, hello," I said, surprised to see someone. I had been sharing a story about our experiences. Let me start again so you can understand the whole situation. At 64, I never imagined that something as simple as cleaning would lead to this moment, all because my step-grandson unexpectedly arrived. It had been 12 years since David, my husband, passed away, leaving me in solitude for far too long. That late morning, I finally decided to do what I had been avoiding for years: clear out the basement. That cluttered, dusty space in the house was something I ignored whenever it crossed my mind. The thought of it would tighten my chest, but today I gathered the courage to face it. That room, full of old boxes and musty junk, carried memories from a lifetime. The first box I opened contained something that completely surprised me: an old photo album from my younger days. As I flipped through the pages, one photo stood out to me. It was from a beach party. There I was, holding a margarita in one hand, wearing a bright orange bikini, laughing without a care in the world. A carefree young Elizabeth beamed back at me from the picture. Seeing that photo brought a rush of emotions: warmth and sadness, buried memories, desires, and excitement I had suppressed came flooding back. Just then, I heard a sound from the basement door, and I turned, startled, to see Bruce standing there. I hadn't seen him in 4 years, and now he looked bigger, more grown up, with that familiar smile. The last time I saw him, he was 23, but now he was 27. "Surprise," he said, lifting a coffee cup in the air. "When did you arrive?" I asked, taken aback but happy to see him. "Just now," he replied, coming down the stairs. "I saw your car outside and thought I'd come in. Looks like you could use some help." I was about to decline, but before I could speak, he was already by my side, determined. He was young, but his eyes landed on the album I was holding. "What's this?" he asked. Before I could take the photo from his hands, I froze. His gaze was fixed on the picture of young Elizabeth at the beach. He stared at it for what seemed like forever before turning to me. "Is this you?" he asked. "Yeah," I said with a nervous laugh. "My wild years back then." Bruce's eyes shifted between the photo and me. There was something in his look, a mix of admiration and surprise, that was both unsettling and strangely warming. "Wow, it's hard to imagine you like this, but it's impressive," he said, smiling. "If you like these little confessions, join me on my channel for more. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because trust me, this story is just beginning, and it's one you won't want to miss." For a moment, I felt something stir within me, something I couldn't fully understand. It was emotions I had long buried, feelings that David had never awakened in me. They rose to the surface, but I quickly tried to push them aside. Okay, enough of the trip down memory lane, I said, quickly closing the album. We need to start clearing these boxes out. But I had no idea where that photo, Bruce's expression, and the emotions swirling inside me would lead. Bruce gently stopped my hands as I tried to shut the album. We really need to look at this, he said, half joking, half serious. It's unbelievable seeing you so young, so full of life. Come on, let's look some more. I hesitated. Not all the photos in that album were innocent. Beyond those carefree beach snapshots, there were bolder pictures, moments that captured the more adventurous side of my youth. But seeing how fascinated Bruce was, and feeling the admiration in his gaze, I couldn't refuse. All right, I said with a small smile, but some of these might be a bit much. Bruce laughed and nodded. I'm sure everything's great, he said, taking the album onto his lap as he sat beside me. His breath was so close, it brushed against my skin. As we flipped through the pages, the beach party photos transitioned to snapshots of my college years in nightclubs. One photo showed me in a tight, backless red dress, dancing tipsily. Bruce lingered on that one, staring at it a bit too long. This is really you, he asked, his eyes shifting between the photo and me. His face lit up with awe and curiosity. Yeah, I replied, slightly embarrassed. It was just youth, you know? Things were different then. Bruce was silent for a moment before speaking again. You're incredible, he said. Then, after a pause, all this time, I've only ever thought of you as my grandmother. But you were like a total, I don't know, a party girl. His words made me blush, but they also stirred something deep inside me. I thought of how David had never shown me that kind of admiration, even when I was younger. He had always been distant, cold, and strict. But Bruce, he was different. The look in his eyes told me more than his words ever could. As we continued flipping through the album, the photos became bolder. There was one of me laughing with friends, wearing a short pair of shorts and a bikini top. Another showed me dancing at a nightclub in a plunging black dress. Bruce smiled softly and said, "It's a privilege to see these. Even when you were younger, your beauty was breathtaking." David was one lucky man. His words warmed me, but they also stirred something else within me, something strange. The more I felt Bruce's attention, his interest, the more I realized there was a pull between us. He was the kind of man I had dreamed of when I was younger, confident, openly admiring, eager to discover the parts of me I had kept hidden. When we reached the last page, Bruce closed the album but kept his eyes on me. "Elizabeth," he said softly, "you're truly extraordinary." I was surprised and deeply moved by his words. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that, or said things like that to me. As my eyes met Bruce's, I could feel the tension between us, the air thickening as something shifted, despite the cold, dusty atmosphere in the basement. A warmth began to rise within me. Bruce's presence was making me feel young again, though I had no idea where these feelings were leading. When he closed the album and turned toward me, the admiration in his eyes was still evident. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice soft but completely sincere. "After seeing all those photos, I have to tell you, you haven't changed at all. You still look as young and beautiful as ever." His compliment took me by surprise, leaving me momentarily breathless. Even when I was younger, I wasn't used to hearing such words, especially not from David. My heart raced slightly, and I felt warmth spreading to my cheeks. "Thank you, Bruce," I replied, but I couldn't deny the passage of time. "I've certainly aged, though." I paused for a moment, gathering the courage to continue. "Maybe I've grown older, but I haven't lost touch with my desires. I've never let go of them." Bruce smiled, his green eyes fixed on mine with an unwavering gaze. "I can feel that," he said. "You're not just beautiful, you're absolutely captivating." For a moment, my eyes wandered over his tall, athletic frame. His broad shoulders and slightly curled blonde hair gave him the look of a movie star. But what struck me most was the confident yet gentle expression in his eyes. "It's interesting hearing that from someone like you," I said, with a faint smile. "David was never like you. He was always so calm, so distant. He never did anything to truly surprise or excite me. He was a good man." Bruce tilted his head slightly, listening closely. "But not the kind of man you wanted, right?" he asked. I almost looked away, but couldn't. "Yeah," I admitted. "David was never as passionate or exciting as I wished he could be. I'm not saying he was a bad man, but something always felt missing." Bruce stayed quiet for a moment, then gave me a soft yet confident smile. "Maybe it's important for you to realize that," he said. "Maybe now is the time to figure out what fills that gap." His words sparked something within me. The way this young man was so interested in me, understanding me, and speaking so confidently stirred an excitement I hadn't felt in years. At that moment, I realized Bruce wasn't just different from David. He was also incredibly close to the kind of man I had dreamed of when I was younger. Still, I had no idea where these feelings would lead me, or if they were even the right path to follow. After a brief pause, Bruce stood up, sliding his hands into his pockets. His green eyes focused on me again. "I'm going to put the bike in the garage and come right back," he said in a calm voice. "But don't stay in the basement, Elizabeth. Wait for me in the living room." The certainty in his tone, the way he took charge, had an unusual effect on me. I nodded, agreeing without fully realizing it. "All right, Bruce," I said. Bruce walked upstairs quickly, and as I watched him go, I couldn't help but think about how even his passion for his motorcycle was affecting me. I imagined how he must look while working on it or riding it. Energetic, passionate, determined. Exactly the kind of man I had dreamed of when I was younger. He's so much like the person I always imagined, I whispered to myself. But he's my step-grandson, and yet right now, he's really having an effect on me. I moved into the living room and waited. It wasn't long before Bruce returned, holding a bottle of wine. As soon as my eyes landed on the label, I recognized it instantly. It was my favorite rosé. I had no idea how he knew or why he'd thought of it. But once again, I felt something stir inside me. I got this from the best place I could find, he said, offering a slight smile. I hope you like it. Like it? I asked, surprised. Bruce, this is my favorite wine. How did you know? He shrugged, his expression suggesting he didn't really want to explain. I noticed little things when I was younger. Guess I remembered right. I paused, deeply touched by how much this young man had remembered about me. Bruce, I said softly, this wine is really special and so thoughtful. Thank you. He opened the bottle and poured 2 glasses, handing one to me. Let's share some good memories tonight, Elizabeth, he said. I raised my glass and we toasted. As I took my first sip, the unique taste of the rosé danced on my tongue, and I couldn't help but keep my eyes on Bruce. As our conversation continued, I found myself drawn to him, not just because of how he looked, but also because of the way he thought and carried himself. At one point, when our glasses were nearly empty, Bruce's gaze locked onto mine again. There was warmth in his eyes, an undeniable pull that I couldn't ignore. Inside, I felt something shifting, a mix of fear and excitement, but I still had no idea where these emotions would take me. Suddenly, Bruce paused. He set his glass down on the table and turned back to me. His gaze was more intense now, filled with determination. Elizabeth, he said, his voice low but full of emotion, I can't hide this anymore. I looked at him, realizing my breath had quickened, my heart racing in my chest. Yes, Bruce, I whispered, my voice barely a sound, as if it couldn't handle more. In that moment, Bruce reached for my hand, his fingers gently brushing over mine. The warmth of his touch sent a rush of emotions through me. I know I shouldn't say this, he began, but when I look at you, I can't stop myself. You're not just incredibly beautiful, you're so much more than I ever imagined. His words echoed deep within me, and I felt my face flush. Bruce, I started, but before I could finish, he hesitated for a moment before leaning in. My heart felt like it might stop as I watched him move closer. I knew I should pull away, but I couldn't resist the powerful pull I felt toward him. When his lips touched mine, slow and deliberate, the world seemed to freeze for an instant. The kiss was gentle but deep, and as his strong hands moved to my waist, I felt desires I had buried for years flood back. I allowed myself to completely give in to the moment. When Bruce's lips finally left mine, the tension between us still hung in the air, and my heart was racing uncontrollably. I gazed at him, hoping my eyes could somehow convey what I was feeling, but expressing those emotions with words seemed impossible at that moment. Driven by an undeniable impulse, I leaned in and kissed him again. This time I was the one making the move. As my lips touched his once more, something inside me awakened. Bruce seemed a little taken aback at first, but he quickly reciprocated, and our kiss deepened, becoming more passionate. His hand moved to my waist, and his strong fingers gently pulled me closer, the warmth from his touch flooding through me. As we lay side by side on the couch, there was almost no distance between us. His presence, his breath, everything about him consumed the moment. Resting against his chest, a restless feeling began to stir within me. My heart was still racing, but this time it wasn't from fear or hesitation. It was from an intense longing to let go completely. Slowly, I sat up, feeling his calm yet curious gaze fixed on me. His eyes were so intense, so focused, that it felt as if he understood everything I was going through without a single word. I stood up, hesitating for a moment, my heart pounding, as I allowed a bold, powerful urge to take control. My hands moved to the delicate straps of my dress, which had started to feel like chains holding me back. Bruce didn't speak. He simply watched me, and somehow that gave me the strength to continue. He was supporting me, not physically, but with his gaze. As my fingers grasped the straps and slowly slid them down, the dress slipped off my shoulders and fell softly to the floor, the fabric pooling gently around my bare feet. In that moment, I could finally breathe. It wasn't just a physical action. It felt symbolic, like shedding years of restraint and finally setting myself free. When I looked back at Bruce, the admiration and wonder in his expression were unmistakable. He didn't need to say anything. He understood that this was me breaking through my own limits, fully accepting myself. Bruce slowly rose from his seat and extended his hand toward me. His touch was, as always, both gentle and strong. But this time, I wasn't just embracing him, I was embracing myself. I stayed in that exact position on the couch for a full 15 minutes, barely moving. I was on the edge of exhaustion, yet somehow I managed to hold on. Perhaps it was the years of pent-up desire that had built a strange resilience in me. Bruce's broad, powerful frame had always drawn me in, but now the intensity of my attraction had reached an entirely new level. I was breathless, as if I had left the entire world behind. My heart was racing, my body trembling, and every part of me felt the weight of his presence. For the first time in my life, I felt physically drained in the most thrilling way. It wasn't a limit, it was liberation. Even as I was lost in these overwhelming emotions, my mind drifted to a strange reflection. I realized I hadn't truly lived until now. What had David held me back from all these years? What had I denied myself for so long? This inner questioning felt like both a quiet act of rebellion and a long overdue awakening. Bruce, still catching his breath, ran a hand through his hair. Seeing that he was just as affected as I was gave me a strange sense of comfort. He smiled faintly, fixing his tousled hair, and in a low voice he said, "I'm going to take a shower." In that moment, I saw the sparkle in his eyes, the softness in his voice, and the calm determination behind it all. And just like that, everything felt even more real. I watched as Bruce walked away, but my mind remained fixed on what had just occurred and the bittersweet joy of discovering myself so late in life. If you followed this far, I know my story has left an impact on you. There's so much more to share, and you won't want to miss any of it. Make sure to hit the follow button, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about this story. I'm excited to hear your thoughts, so let's chat in the comments. Your support means the world to me.